Hi, I'm Gary Null. I'd like to welcome you to our continuation of our ongoing series on A Classroom on the Air. And what do we teach in these classrooms? We teach about life, how to deal with problems. Do you have problems with money? Do you have problems with relationships? Do you have a problem with your own self-image, with discipline? Are you around toxic people and you're afraid of becoming toxic? Making new friends? That's not easy to do, but how do you do that? How do you keep a relationship vital and dynamic and creative and upbeat after a period of years? We are all faced with these in different circumstances. And now more than ever, we have so many things happening in our world. We need a more positive outlook. That's what all this is about. Hi, I'm Gary Null, and this is a continuation of our ongoing series of self-empowerment discussions. Now, what you're about to see and hear are feedback questions or statements of a film that we were just playing, a multi-award winning film called Poverty, Inc. It's a long film. It's a very concentrated in information and insight film. It took me 7 years to write and direct it and film it. And partly it took that a long period of time because everything was fluid. How deep would the market go, how much equity be lost, and how many people's accounts be wiped out, how many communities that were at one time working class and stable would go into poverty and be ghettoized, how many businesses would close, how many people go broke, would anybody be held accountable, would the bankers be held accountable for the mistakes they made? And so I put all that into a film with the finest behavioralists, psychologists, economists in the world. And so they've just had a chance to watch. Now what we're doing now is I've produced and written and directed over 100 documentaries and films. And instead of watching them, and I'm not recommending people watch a whole film anymore. And I've just come to this in the last year because I find in a group that I work with that if I give them short amounts, 20 minutes, or read one page out of a book and then stop and reflect, what does this mean? Now, maybe it doesn't mean anything, but maybe it does. But if you read one interesting thing, then another, it's like watching, 10 Academy Award films from Citizen Kane to Dr. Zhivago to Bridge Over the River Kwai to Gone with the Wind, all back to back. You will remember almost nothing because it's just an overflow of our senses. We can't process the information. So it's important that we begin to possibly rethink how we process information. Now, as a teacher, I'm always interested in that. And as a teacher, I've never gotten up and just given a long teaching session. I give 10, 15 minutes and stop and say, now, tell me what you think of this. How does this affect you? How do you respond to this? And then I see whether or not they're learning something or not. Now, interesting in radio, especially internet radio, and you never have this in traditional terrestrial radio where you sit behind a mic and you do a show and you don't know if people like it or not like it. In this new age, you do, and it's instantaneous. Everything is monitored. So the number of people tuning in, how long they listen, and they tune out. So if I'm talking about a topic and I find, boom, the audience go down, I'll cut that topic short. And if I find a topic where the numbers are going up, I'll just keep going with that because I know people are saying, I find this of interest. Well, if the whole purpose of doing a program is to share information and insight that can empower people, then you're really honoring the people. Therefore, you're creating a dynamic relationship where you're being trusted to look objectively at all things with the resources you have and the mastery and scholarship you've created and say, here's what I found. Right? If you want nitric oxide in your blood so that your heart is healthier, your blood flows more, we found that the peer-reviewed scientific literature says, eat pomegranates, eat beets, drink beet juice. Here are the studies. And people try it and it works. Now, every time someone tries something that you've suggested about anything in life and it works, they're more likely to come back and say, okay, keep going. You're a good source. Now, if you get lazy, intellectually lazy or lazy in your career, been there, done that, you know. And I've seen this. I've seen this in some legendary figures in the media. I won't mention them because most are dead. But I was there when they would go in and they would have 3 producers going through all the newspapers, cutting out stories, posting them, and then the host would come in and say, okay, this is on politics, this is on, and they would go on the air, hi, this is such and such, and we're going to open their calls because we'd like your opinion on this. And then they'd cite a, you know, topic, and it's almost always some inflammatory topic. That's bad radio, that's bad media, because you haven't done your homework. You don't know if the audience really wants that. How many people are tuning out because it's not connecting with them? But that's a lot of media. What happens if you change and you're really there to serve the interest of the public? Would your broadcasting and reporting be different? Would you self-censor because of your own political bias and ideological reference point? Or would you just say, here's what I found, even though I may or may not believe in it? So that's the point of a film. You're giving a person, yourself, an opportunity, watch a little bit, stop, and then analyze it. What does it mean? What did I just see? How will that influence me? Can I make a different decision than I have up to this point because of what I just saw? So that's what we're doing now, like a little TED Talk. So here are some of the participants who are here for 60 days to hopefully be able to reverse their aging process. And by the way, you ask, well, what in the world does a documentary on poverty have to do with my aging? It has everything to do with aging, everything. You think it's just about vitamins and supplements, NAD and PQQ and resveratrol? Not at all. You could take all those all day long. It's not going to make a difference if the context in which you're using something is not grounded in the authenticity of your actual self. And how do you know which self is taking something in, which self is listening, which self is responding? Is it your real self, or is it the self that was obedient to everyone else's ideas of what you should be and what you should do and where you should live and what you should eat and who you should marry and how many kids you should have? Everything in your life is micro-controlled outside of you, even unconsciously at the epigenetic level, the epi, the environment, and you're being a good son, a good daughter, a good husband, wife, friend, and you're obeying all these principles of everyone else. So one day you wake up and you've succeeded, right? But there's what I call the big empty. There's just something missing in the core of your being because you took someone else's path. So, are you better able to change your biochemistry and your genetic influence by living an authentic life where you're happy and not stressed? Because stress is going to age you prematurely. And are you comfort eating because you're frustrated, but you have this unrequited sense that no matter what I say, no matter what I believe, well, I'm on nobody and nobody's going to do anything. So do you hold that angst in and sublimate by drinking, drugs, overworking, over-responsible, overeating, gambling? Sublimation takes many different forms because then you're going to prematurely age. So what if you don't have enough money to be healthy? And a lot of poor people say, I'm too poor to be healthy. I can't eat healthy. Well, that's not right. They do have enough money, but not in the conditioned self that believes that a good meal is when you go and a fast food meal and you pay, $10 for a fast food meal when you could have gotten healthy food instead of diseasing food, for $1.50 if you knew what to buy and where to buy it. So you see, everything is interconnected. We have been living a monotheistic existence. Monotheism, single-minded, one view, one crop, monocrops, grow soybeans. But what about growing 100 crops? You have diversity. Oh, we don't do that. So where we were at one time in our society, very self-sufficient, very capable, very mature at how we dealt with life and death and transitions. When we went from one place in life to another, there were wise men and women to help us and let us understand what's it mean when you go from being young to middle age to older to senior to the death process. What happens when you're married versus divorced? What happens when you're married versus now you're a widow or widower? How do you deal with that? Because we're all going to deal with these things. Life is never for anyone smooth, effortless, and without challenge. Everyone ever born and lives a life has to go through multiple crises. We're all going to go through the crisis of a pet dying, a friend dying, a parent dying, which is a great tragedy, a child dying if you're the parent. You don't get over these things easily. But in other cultures, they have worked together. They've come together. You can have people in India that once had 100 small little farms. A farm might be an acre. And they grew lentils. Another one grew cashews. Another grew split peas. But they would all come together and lay their produce out, whatever they were growing. And it was cheap, but they also exchanged. So everyone had plenty to eat. They were poor, but they were not malnourished. And everyone's child going down the street was watched by every other mother. So it's just like in Little Italy in America, in New York City. No child gets hurt in Little Italy because you've got a lot of mothers and grandmothers sitting on the pillow in the window gate looking. Who's that person? Yeah. And suddenly they call someone, and suddenly some big guy who's got no neck and weighs 400 pounds says, "What are you looking at this person for? You don't belong here?" Okay. But what it means that there's a collective sense of care. Where now, with the urbanization and the destruction of the family's values of spending quality time together to go through the happiest moments and the saddest moments, to at least look in someone's eyes and feel the energy of that unique relationship. Now people sit in front of a computer screen, alienated from anything that has a pulse, that has a vibration. So this is why understanding what the person needs to rebalance will help them also live a longer life. So let's just go right down through here, and I'm asking him to stand up because I only have one microphone. What questions or statements you want to make about the film?
Extract ourselves from what took 40 years to build without a total collapse and destruction. Disempower these people and deconstruct the systems that they've created and establish new systems that is more equitable.
Okay, what you're really saying that I'm hearing is that we have a society right now, and have been for some years, decades, that prides itself on its lack of equality, where intentionally people are made to suffer. That's not the unintended consequences, that's the intended consequence. Because these are the best and brightest. These are people from your Ivy League schools and Wharton Business School and London School of Economics. These are smart people. So it's not as if they wandered into, oh my God, you mean when we took a factory that had been here for 100 years? True story, by the way, true story. And it was making bricks, and everyone had a living wage, no one had debt, everyone owned their own home, every kid went to school, a public school, and you had a car. People suffer from naught. People would join together and do things together at a social level. In the summertime, it was softball, league, and you cheered on the local high school teams, and you knew each other, you cared about each other, because that core company represented the livelihoods and hence standard of living and quality of life for several hundred citizens. And that was only one of many. So hence a community, when it grew steadily. It was stable. There were no fractures in it. So if the president of the company went to church, you were sitting beside him. Their kid went to the same school. Now they might have lived in a different house, but where I grew up, and where most people grew up, the people who ran the communities were not ostensibly that much different than the rest of the people. You didn't have inequality at such a startlingly stark contrast. They didn't have gigantic mansions. You know, they didn't drive, you know, $1 million cars as people do today. They didn't walk around bling. It would have been embarrassing, and they would have known it because there were certain social norms. You do not brag about or exploit your excesses. If you're fortunate enough to have something that is discreet. So there was discretion. Then along in the and we were very stable as a society. Main companies like U.S. Steel, Xerox, IBM, you know, General Electric, General Motors. These were the most, let's say, well-run companies in the world. And you could have generations working there. And the unions forced them through collective bargaining so you didn't get exploited. They wouldn't allow child labor. That happened earlier, but if it weren't for unions, they would have still exploited child. So it wasn't as if the people who were running these corporations were in and of themselves benevolent. There was a balance maintained. Now let's go back to balance. So here were the unions and here were the workers. Here were the people who owned the majority of the stock and were on the boards in a lot of banks because they had a regular, small profit, but it increased and their value went up. So there was a balance between those who were the policy makers and those who were the opinion leaders. So one created the policy, the other created the opinion. So what you didn't want to do in a small town was to do something really foolish that would hurt the workers, because then you were hurting the workers' families, you were hurting the local economy, because at that time a dollar would travel around a community as much as 55 times. So you got paid and you went to the dry cleaner. Dry cleaners went to the restaurant. Restaurant went to the movie theater. Movie theater went to the parking lot. It kept circulating. Now today, you go in, you use a card, it goes one place. Nothing happens around that community because it could be a company whose headquarters is in another country. So the profits are accumulating everywhere except in the local community. That's why thousands of towns in the United States went bankrupt, for all intents and purposes. They become Rust Belt, or industrial, empty communities. But then everything changed because of 5 people. Michael Milken, who's still alive, and T. Boone Pickens, who just passed, Carl Icahn, who's still alive, Ivan Bosky, I don't believe he's alive, and Carl and Steinberg, Saul Steinberg. Now these 5 people began by saying, or I'm not suggesting they're saying, I'm projecting that at some point they had to come to an idea that wouldn't it be better if we could make money off money instead of jobs and companies? And so they would go in and they would going to buy a lot of stock, and suddenly they would get a seat based on the amount of stock they bought on a board. And suddenly they wanted all these ideas. We want these workers, fired, and we want this profitable part of a company sold. And people were saying, hold on a second. This company is run well, it's profitable, it's stable. It's the heartbeat of this whole town. Go down every street. You have lawns that are clean, gardens in the backyard, kids that are happy, no crime. Well, they didn't care. Extremely selfish. And so then they started getting what was called green mail. In effect, it's a form of financial blackmail. We'll give you money, go away. So they started getting money, much more than what they invested, to go away. And they did. But then they figured out, how they could take over companies and then justify taking a company that was important for thousands of people and shipping it off to India, Haiti, Trinidad, and later, not earlier, China. Because these people in these countries wanted business. And since they weren't making what an hourly worker was making clothes, and I know this for a fact because I was the official nutritionist for the International Ladies Garment Worker Union, where I would go down and teach these women how not to be diabetic and sick by sitting there all day and eating candy as they were sewing stuff. And we lost thousands and thousands of pounds by them changing, and they got healthy. And it was a lot of fun. But they were, because of their union, they were able to have a job. They even had a whole area built for them down in the 20s, over around 8th Avenue. Whole series of buildings where they could have really low rent. And it was a nice neighborhood. And they could walk to work over at 7th Avenue and, you know, the 32nd Street, 30th, 20th, the garment industry. Now, think of it this way. Here, let's just say for our argument's sake, they were making $20 an hour when you include healthcare. And that was a big add-on to the cost of every product. At one time, it was said that for every car, about $500 was added on to the cost of a car because of the health insurance. All right? Someone has to pay for these things. And everyone wants to pass it on to the consumer. And you never see when you're buying something, oh, the sewing machine, this refrigerator, this car, you're paying an extra $50 to $500 because someone's health care is being paid. Which is right. You know, you should be told what are the costs of anything. Where's that money going? So now you go to India, and the Indian says, look, we've got millions of people who work, who are good at what they do, and you don't have any OSHA, you don't have any environmental protections, you can pollute all you want, we don't have labor laws, you can abuse people, and you get a product so cheap that you can make it in India, bring it back to the United States, and sell it for cheaper than what you can even make it. So suddenly everybody goes, whoa, profit, profit, profit. Now, it began to be that executives and corporations, their salaries each year were directly tied to how much profit or the percentage of profit they were making over the previous year. So they were getting all kinds of special rewards, including options. An option is the ability to take a stock that would normally cost on the market, let's say $100, and they could have options to buy it at a cheaper price. Now, if you know that the stock is going to go up, and you've caused that stock to go up because of expenses you've cut, always at the expense of those who are making the least amount of money, and you're exploiting labor in another country, but you don't care about that, but now you're getting an item in that you couldn't even manufacture. So now the only value your company has is a brand name. Now the people watching television, it doesn't say, hi, you know this bike that we all grew up wanting, the Raleigh bike or the Schwinn bike? Used to go sell papers. I did. It took me 3 years to get a Schwinn bike, which I still have. And they were made right. Well, let me tell you about this bike. This is made now in this country, China. And these people are making 30 cents an hour. And we're going to be able to make this bike and bring it back in on a container ship and put it in a store. And you used to work in that factory to make this bike. You're going to be able to go in there and buy this at $30 for the bike when it used to cost your company $50 to make. How about that? So now that spread between the initial cost in America and the cost of bringing it in and selling it, that became a part of the margin of profit. So now you could say, I raised the profit 20%. Now suddenly Wall Street goes, oh, our institutional investors need that profit. So huge investment pools, such as the teachers union and the civic unions and the federal unions. These people control trillions, cumulative trillions of dollars in retirement money. So what happens is this, here's where you get imbalanced. You're given an option. We can invest in stock where companies are producing goods and services in the United States and people are making a living wage, as you did, but you will not make as much profit. We'll be able to get a return of maybe 2%, all right, 3%. But your contract says when you retire, your pension is at 8% a year. For example, the Dallas Police, they get guaranteed 8% a year. But what if the economy's not growing? What if we're in a recession? Doesn't matter. The Constitution says we get this. Well, then people have to look for the cheapest way they can get more money in. And then suddenly all these unions say, okay, what do our investors want? What are the people who worked hard their whole life? What do they want? Do you want to make money ethically, where no one's hurt? Or do you want us to go around and look at armament makers, cigarette companies, pharmaceutical drugs, even those that kill people and have a track record, the whole pharmaceutical industry, of their drugs injuring and killing thousands and thousands of people, paying billions of dollars in fine, having really ugly backgrounds, but you'll make a profit of 8%, 6%. So, the ethics of an entire country's investment class, not the richest, regular people, it shifted down. So we lost our ethics. We no longer cared about how our money was earned, as long as we got it, and who suffered, as long as we got it, and what environmental destruction happened, as long as we got it. If you invested in a palm plantation in Indonesia and they had to burn down the forest and kill all the orangutans, and I put a picture up recently, about 6 months ago on my website, and it was a picture of a completely deforested area and one mother orangutan on one branch with her baby, and they were about to kill her. That's what you don't see when your union and your pension fund, or however is the people who control your money, are investing because they're looking, where can I make the most? Now we should be divesting from this, but we don't, because we have sunk down to the lowest common denominator of greed, indifference, hubris, and insensitivity to what has to happen for us to make our money. Now ask the average American, you have a choice. Earn your money ethically, or earn your money any way you want, even if people are dying, suffering, getting black lung, brown lung in the cotton fields and the mill fields, or in the coal mines, or industrial places. And right now, the majority will say, I want the money. It's not my fault, and then they assuage all their guilt like Pontius Pilate. My hands are clean. I want my money. Now, if you doubt me, then look at how we invest our money. Did you ever ask yourself, with that, and it's a well-done television program with Stacy Keach on American Greed. They show you how good people are at conning other people and then using it for their own, their own lifestyle. But I never hear anyone saying, I was stupid. I had savings I'd worked hard for and honestly, and I wanted more. At what point do we say, shouldn't we have a conversation in America about the underlying reasons why we are greedy, why we've destroyed our rivers and our national forests, and we've privatized to be exploited every resource we have here and around the world. I don't care where you go, you'll find people suffering. Average people suffering because other people have control over the resources and how they're allocated and how they're exploited. If you want to see a good example of that, go to the Congo. 5 million Congolese have been killed in civil strife in just the last 40 years. That's a genocide. Do you ever see that mentioned? No. Because there you have kids mining for the minerals that go into your cell phone. So let's just say you're one of those, let's take Friday off and go protest. Okay. Are you going to protest your cell phone? You're going to give up your cell phone? No. You're going to give up your hamburgers? No. You're going to give up your flat screen TVs? No. You're going to give up your Wi-Fi? No. Okay, well, I'm a little confused. What exactly are you willing to sacrifice to show that you care about the environment and its sustainability, or the animals on the environment? Are you eating the tuna? Oh, yeah. Are you eating the salmon? Yeah. Are you eating farm-raised salmon? Yeah. And you're not seeing that 90% of all the fish in the world are gone and the oceans are acidifying? Well, I don't see it, I don't know. But you have access to all the information in the world. So what exactly are you accessing and how are you processing it? So do you think the bankers are not fully aware of everything they do when all of Wall Street is a Ponzi scheme? All of it. Because they don't care. They only care about how much profit they can make. Hence, the amount of money that the average worker makes in a company versus the head of the company used to be, they were not that far out of alignment, maybe 10 times more. Right? Now it could be hundreds and hundreds of times more. Some guys in some companies and women, they can make up to $50,000 an hour, and they're not at the top end. There are people making that in a minute. Jeff Bezos makes that every minute. Yet you have people at Walmart, and there's one of the wealthiest families in the world. In fact, they're right up at the top as far, when you take the children, because they're the ones who have it. Sam Walmart, Walton died, and they own Sam's Club and Walmart and other things. And as you heard from the film, you're dealing with Walmart. They have 800 factories in China. Did you know that? So all the money goes to buy their goods, cheap goods, and then sold in our box stores that people think they have to have. And then you stop. Hold on a friend. Did you protest when the owners, the equity partners of your company said they're going to take your jobs and send them over and say, well, what can I do? What can I do? Huh? So you didn't really fight back. So then you lost your job. So here's the irony. You now go to a box store to buy something you used to make. That's a negative feedback loop. Negative feedback loop. And do you really need that stuff? So the solution is problematic because we're not in enough pain as a country to change. Everyone wants change that they can benefit from. They just don't want to be a part of the change. I wish it were otherwise. I'm just being completely frank. So ask the average person, do you want a heart attack? Do you want a stroke? You have a choice. Let's go through the Chinese menu of diseases. You can have diabetes, a stroke, heart attack, right? You can have dementia, in which case you won't remember which disease you had. Right? Fatigue, pain, cystitis. You tell me what you want. And someone will, well, hold on, I don't want any of that. Sure you do. No, I don't. Everything you're doing is creating that. Everything. Are you willing to give up any of your habits in order to not to get those diseases? Well, I mean, right? In which case, they've just answered the question. So then they should be honest. We should have a nation of honesty. The journalists go, hi, I'm on NBC, I'm on MSNBC, I'm on CNN, especially CNN. Hi, everyone. We're here not to report the news. We're here to convince you of what you should believe because we're very biased, because our career depends upon it. We can't say anything about our advertisers, even if their products are dangerous or kill people, because that's where the money comes that pays our inflated salaries. We're not normal people. We make the big bucks. We make millions of dollars. We have stylists. We have cosmetic surgeons. We don't go out in the sun because if we did, we'd melt. We can't have a conversation because we're not intellects, though we went to schools that's supposed to teach us how to think, but we went to teach the test. So here's what it comes to. We want you to believe us even though everything we're going to tell you has already been scripted and defined as an ideological weapon. We're going to use our words to attack those people that ideologically we don't like because we don't want this balance of power. We want you not to have options and choices and freedom to choose. We want to talk about why you must take vitamins or you don't take vitamins, or you must take a vaccine or not take vaccine, because we've already figured it out. You must take vaccines, you must not take vitamins. And why? And our doctors will tell you the same thing. Hi, I'm Dr. Schmuck, and I'm here to tell you there's never been a case in American history where a child was taking a vaccine got autism. In fact, it's rare that anything happens. Thank you, Dr. Schmuck. And Dr. Schmuck is from Harvard, and we know how honest Harvard graduates are. Oh, God. And so we defer to authority figures instead of looking for the truth. Because I can find you a lot of studies showing how dangerous vaccines are, and there's no proof of their safety or efficacy based upon real scientific standards. But we don't go that far. We don't go any further than our biases. Real scholarship eludes us, even in academia, and especially in academia. So now here's another problem. You're going to the very people who should talk to the people about that message, and they're biased. The very people they bring on these talk shows of expert panelists on the economy, not one of them saw this coming. Not one of them showed who was responsible. Alan Greenspan and the 18,000 economists that he has the availability to talk and give feedback. I don't believe any of them didn't know this was coming. But that's the problem. There is no consequence to failing if you're the person with power. If you have power, you control the perception of you. And as long as a large group of people are benefiting from your power and your largesse, then nothing will ever be questioned or challenged or changed, and nobody will be held accountable. If you jaywalk, you could go to jail or get a ticket. Right? There's two standards, one for those with power and one without. The trouble is it's all an illusion. Power is a complete illusion. One day, Richard Nixon was the most powerful person in the world. The next day he was like this, getting on his helicopter to go to San Simeon, and he had no power whatsoever. Well, what happened to it? The American public, not the power brokers, no longer felt that he represented or could represent their interests and protect them. So he was disposed of, but he is a rare, rare exception. So all the people who made the mistakes in Wall Street, all the people who caused the recession, all the people who lied about the actual causes, not one was held accountable. And as a result, when it came time for the bailout, we were lied to. We have to give them $800 billion. Then it was $1 trillion. It ended up being somewhere between $6 and $21 trillion, depending upon whose figures. But that was companies that created the problem, were not held accountable, didn't have to give back their ill-gotten gains. And what about small businesses? The number one employers in America are small businesses. What about you and you and you? None of us were given a nickel. None of us were helped because we don't hold the power. And if we don't have the power, we then don't control the perception that we are the victims, not them. The Wall Street economy is a fraud, and they control the media, and they control the judicial system, and they control the Treasury, and they control the Council of Economic Advisors. So every position of power they control. So who exactly is going to tell them, stop? Nobody. So to answer the first question, there will be no change. There cannot be change. It is impossible to change anything in America. All right? I wished I could give you some looty-dooty, let's all, kumbaya, and we'll get over this. We're going to learn a lesson. We learn no lessons from anything. If you want to know how bad we are, I'll take you down to the 9th Ward where I've gone many times in New Orleans and show you that the Corps of Engineers spending billions and tens of billions of dollars raised the wall that much when the first hurricane that is a category 4 or 5 is going to breach that by 5 feet, meaning nothing they did will help. And the homes are still wrecked. I've gone into places that don't have but dirt floors for the house. And as you're standing there and the light's coming through the prism of the light through the window, you see gazillions of these dust particulates in the air. So here's a home where the clothes were neatly stacked and the towels were stacked, and they tried to do this best they can, but they have a dirt floor. So everything's covered in this dirt. And that's not one house, that's hundreds of houses. So what did we learn? Nothing, except we profited from them by selling canvases to put on your roof, the blue tarps that would cost you about $60 for $2,000. All right? The only people who benefit from any crisis and look forward to crisis and really are happy about a crisis are those who can exploit it. Just like the coronavirus. You think any of you are going to get any of that $2 trillion, then you're delusional. The airline industry that doesn't give a shit for you, they never are good about anything, and they're going to get everything back plus profits. So this will be a bonanza for many of them. Small businesses, nothing. They promise you, let's see how quickly they deliver. Then comes the reality. It's always the reality. Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, all the hurricanes, we learned nothing. Nothing. We've learned nothing about disease. Not a single word about all the people dying every day. We're counting the number of people with coronavirus deaths, but not heart deaths. Children's disease deaths that were induced by bad diets. Nothing. So what exactly we're supposed to do? Say that all this other human suffering doesn't matter, but this matters. Where's there any attention? So you don't have it. So I'm not being negative, I'm being honest. The people who changed the system and saw why have a factory where you've got problems with unions and problems with environmental and OSHA and standards and cost of merchandise and supply when you can make money off money. Let's go into options and derivatives and credit default swaps and shorting stocks. None of that affects the economy, except it destroys it. Equity partners are the parasites. The lowest form of person handling money in America is an equity partner, in my opinion. They're the ones who collect money together, rarely their own. They get bridge capital from other companies that create the bridge money, and they find a company that's well run, that has no debt. They go in and they make offers. Your stock is now 22, we're going to give all of you 27. And suddenly, greed. Oh, that's a great deal. Or they give the owners. You're getting a big multi-million-dollar bonus. Oh, that's great. The moment that deal is made, the clock to its death. Circuit City, Linens and Things, Toys R Us, that's Bain Capital, that's Mitt Romney. All of this starts to go into effect. It's a death sentence because their only interest is not keeping the factories and businesses alive. It's loading it up with servicing the debt load. And every money that comes in, they take it as their management fees. So even if you pay twice back to them, you're still left with the same debt. And then they start stripping off employees, even using employees in pensions when it goes into bankruptcy because they had the preferred stock. They're the first ones to take it out of bankruptcy and sell the company back again. These are the vulture capitalists. And that's the dominant, complete way that Wall Street works and American business works. You make billions of dollars by exploiting debt to your advantage and everyone else's lack of understanding economics. That's our entire economy. That's our mindset. That's the way capitalism works today. There's no ethics in capitalism unless it's the smaller people or some companies that may consider what they're doing. Even Al Gore and these other people, they're the same vulture capitalists, except they've manipulated and mastered how to convince you that you need to change the environment. All they're doing is looking to get the money either for their solar or for some other deal, and they're worth billions of dollars in their hedge funds now. They're not out there changing how we could really help the environment by stop tearing down forests and stop eating animal proteins and start doing organic farming, and they don't care about that. I mean, look at them. Look at their lives. Look at what they do, flying in private jets, and so you see it's utter hypocrisy. So we are living by an imbalance, and the imbalance is this. We're told that we should always be financially responsible. Don't buy what you can't afford. Don't go into debt. Stop using your credit cards and kiting them, meaning paying one bill you got with a credit card and then paying that credit card with another credit card, and you're always staying just 1 month behind. And they want you not to be able to pay. The banks love it when they rejoice. There's a hallelujah. Mrs. Jones, who's on Social Security and has got a broken hip and can't afford anything and can't take her meds because she can't afford those. Now we can take her from 18 or 19% interest up to 36% interest. She'll never get out of this, and all that's profit, profit, profit. And let's get Samuel Jackson up there, and he'll say, "Fool, what's in your pocket?" Well, thank God, not your consciousness. All right? But here's the logic. Anytime, anywhere, you get 2% back. I said 2% back. All right? You got to use that 2%. You're getting it back. Sam, I'm not a fool, sir. You're telling people to get 2% back and give the credit card company 16% on an 18% interest. How is that smart? You're left with 16% you got to pay from 2% you got to return on. That makes no sense to me. None. Could you imagine? I'm going to give you 5 cents back out of every dollar you give me. Well, let me give you my dollars. You keep giving me those nickels back. I mean, how dumb do we think, they think we are? And yet we are that dumb because we've been conditioned to believe them, because they're authority figures. So there's no balance in our economic mindset if we're considering that a PhD in economics or someone from the Wharton School of Business or an MBA, they must know more than I do. They do not. They're idiots. They're not in the real world. They're looking for every gimmick they can to exploit the market to their advantage. They don't want to build factories. They don't want a lot of people working. They don't want made in America. Now they'll take their money up to a quaint little town in Connecticut or out to Long Island, and they love it when they go to let's go to the farmer's market. Hey, some locally grown carrots. Ask the chef to get them and take back to our cook. Hire the gourmet chef to come out this weekend. Let everyone know we're having an organic meal from local fish, local meat, local vegetables. We are really, and we shop at Whole Foods. We are really together people. We are trendy. So people pretending to be unique, and they're not. They're insecure. And insecure people, there's never enough to live with a balance. Now, my grandmother lived in a balanced way. My mother did. They didn't spend what they didn't have. They didn't covet something to make them feel happy. They didn't believe happiness is in what you bought or what you possessed. They believed happiness was within them by being happy about your family, your friends, your neighbors, your life, your work. And today we're trying to buy happiness, and it's a very expensive purchase. So do you understand? If you think you're going to change the system, no one changes the system. It's too big. There are too many people benefiting from it. Now, the young people see the corruption. They're aware of it. They see we shouldn't have money in politics. They see we should reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act. They see we should stop the military-industrial complex from absolutely gorging on our fear of being victimized by some other country when we spend more on money than all the other countries in the world combined. There's no threat out there to us. And yet we're the threat because there's nothing left. And these companies are not making us safer. They just can't stop. They are a corporate malignancy. They just keep metastasizing further and further and further. Until there's just the entire world they have some interest in. The Council on Foreign Relations, the other places you go to get insight, all captured. So if your scientific community is captured, if your medical community is captured, if your economic community is captured, if your industrial food community is captured, if your energy cartels are all captured, then exactly who is supposed to cause change? Because it's only policymakers that can cause change. Unless you can marshal 3.5% or more of the population to address these issues with articles, information, documentaries, and then have someone in the media advocate for you. But no one in the media is going to advocate because they're the problem. Back in 1974, at the church hearings, and Senator Church was a real courageous person, like like Representative Wellstone. He wanted to tell us the truth. So he brought hearings forth where the director of the CIA had to testify. And under oath, he was asked about how much influence do you have on the media? And it was almost total. But then in that same testimony, there was the head of news for CBS who bragged about it. Today, all your stories go through the Pentagon and hence the military-industrial complex to be censored, and they'll correct things. The media constantly passes stories before they air them out to these groups so they can correct it. So who's going to tell you the truth about economics? Here's the truth of everything. See if this makes sense to you. Countries are judged based upon their percentage of debt against their gross domestic product. let's just say we're critical of Greece because it was about 170%, and Italy and France were similar, meaning they had higher debt than they had total gross income. So we were really critical of them, and therefore we demanded through the International Monetary Fund and the European Central Bank that an austerity program. The austerity program took people and cut their pensions right down to the bone. Like some pensions went from $1,400 to $700 a month in Greece. And they stopped hiring, and they stopped putting money into businesses, so businesses couldn't borrow to keep their businesses alive. So for about 2 years, people in Greece went through an extreme tightening. People were actually dumpster diving. People would have to go out and look for food who had never done this. This was humiliation. And the world said, too bad. And Goldman Sachs was responsible for that. Absolutely responsible. They were behind it because they were profiting from it. I think they made $400+ million off of that, counseling them what to do. And so no one looked at America, and Greece has not recovered. They simply learned to deal with less. Right? And they wouldn't let them forgive the debt. They should have had a debt forgiveness, like they did with Wall Street banks. We'll forgive all your debt, and we'll give you new money at 0 interest. So all your bad debt is gone. No, they won't do that for Greece, or Italy, or Spain, or Ireland. So massive unemployment. In the United States, if you start looking at our corporate debt, state debt, local debt, our debt on credit cards, car payments, mortgages, as student loans, you look at the underfunded entitlements, the funded entitlements, unfunded entitlements, you put all, and our national debt, which is just really interest on in what we've given to banks, and then we've given them a profit of 3% to store money they didn't even create, and then they supposedly give it back, but it's never really that way. It's all done on a keyboard. No cash changes hands. And that's about 22 trillion and growing at least $1 trillion a year. And this will be 2 more trillion this year because of this coronavirus bailout. So very quickly, we're going to be at 25 trillion. That's more than our gross domestic product, just in and of itself. One debt exceeds all the money that we raise. And then you give corporations the ability not to pay taxes, and so they don't. And you don't have one flat tax of, let's say, 20% that all corporations have to pay, and they can't write off anything. That would give us at least $1 trillion extra a year. But because corporations control legislation, and legislation then is enacted to help the corporations, not the people, we pay a higher percentage of taxes. Everyone in this room pays a higher percentage of tax than any corporation in the United States. You pay a higher percentage than Google or Facebook or any of the other ones. That's wrong. And yet everybody prides themselves in how smart they are because they don't have to do it, because they captured that legislative vote. And then the people are on these committees. Everyone in Washington knows when the phone rings and it's a lobbyist, you pick it up because that's the person looking after your future. You then compromise on all these people to write bills that you then give to your legislator, who's a functional idiot, and they then go in and act like, their own pompous way, like, I'm producing this bill, presenting it so that we can blah, blah, blah. None of that is true. It's all who's behind it. What is the progenitor? Who are the people? Almost always the special interest groups representing the oligarchs, corporate America, are behind it. So, one day you wake up and you don't have much money. 100 million Americans could not write you a check for $500. Half of Americans go paycheck to paycheck. That's it. If they lose work or they don't have the same paycheck, and now because they can, they're reducing the workforce to half-time so they don't have to pay health insurance. They're doing everything they can. They're taking any company that's vulnerable, stripping off its assets, taking it off to India or China. Now India and China are willing to build you a factory, supply with all the workers. They'll do it all because they create their own currency. You never know. No one knows how much currency China has because they have what is known as the shadow banking system. Chinese government owns almost every corporation from behind the scenes. So they keep pumping more money in, and when the business goes bad, they just roll over the debt, because they don't want a lot of unemployment. We don't do that here. We bail out the people who cause the problems, and everyone else who suffers, who's a victim, you're on your own. So we have socialism for the rich and powerful in corporate America, but when it comes to making a profit, they don't share any of the profit. It's a one-way street. And no one's going to talk about it because they're all enabled by the system. So once you're in that circle of power, you can stay in it forever. The whole life is made. There are people in Washington, D.C. who have never worked a regular job, and they're just doing fine. You, not so much. So my suggestion is, don't try to fight the system, get out of it. I believe that the best thing you can do is in the next 2 to 3 years, find small communities of progressive people, what are called intentional communities, where people go to maintain their quality of life, where it's a more serene environment, cleaner environment, less hectic environment, and be around people you can befriend who share common values. That's the future for those who want that future. It will not be everybody, probably about 2%. 2% of 330 million people, it's still around 7 million people, more or less. So it's still a good number of people. I'd rather live in an environment where I have clean water, clean food, no debt, health, happiness, nice people, than not know my neighbor in New York City, right? And be pushed and shoved on subways and no streets safe and dirty, gritty, angry. But there was a time when New York was magnificent. It was the epicenter of all things exciting, and you had opportunities. Now, the average worker in New York City can't afford to live there. 51% of all people living in New York are living at or below the poverty level. There's no middle class left. Everything's been gentrified, so someone can benefit. So when you have so many people who've desensitized themselves, it was the yuppies, people who could come out and say, oh, this used to be a Latino neighborhood, buy all the buildings. Get the people out, and we'll make that into a gourmet restaurant, and that into a boutique, and now you go to Brooklyn, you go to different places, yeah, they got nice neighborhoods, nice restaurants, but nobody asks, how did this happen? Because people can afford that. They don't think about who lived here for 50 years, 60 years. They don't care. So when you lose your caring for other people, you've lost what makes you spiritual. And there is no spirituality in economics or the capitalist system today. So don't look for anyone in power to help you. They're the problem, not the solution. Go back to what our grandparents went through the Great Depression, and our parents. How did they survive without any social services? Because their community, their churches, their families, they began to value other things other than their possessions. And as a result, they managed. So we're just living with too many ideas about our comfort. We value comfort above health, happiness. Does that answer your question? Good. Bruce.
I was just blown away by your commentary, Gary. I think all my synapses are firing at the same time. Let's say we do have some savings. Let's say we do have some resources. What is the best areas to put those resources in your estimation? Okay,
good question, Bruce. So let's say you have a little bit of savings. And a lot of Americans have a little bit of savings. Some have more savings. And you can't look at just one segment of the American population. We don't have an economy. It doesn't exist. It's a myth. We have multiple economies. The billionaires have one economy, and it's unique. They'll never spend all their money, nor can they lose all their money. You have the super rich, those over $100 million to $1 billion. And again, they have, that's not including the real estate, so they have massive amounts of wealth. And what would you spend it on? They're not out there building factories to employ people. They're not building communities. They're not de-ghettoizing communities, which we could do. If we just took our millionaire class and have them put 1/10 of what they have in savings, just their savings, 1/10, they still keep 90% in de-ghettoizing communities, we would not have a single ghetto in America. All right? But they don't. They keep buying more because they're caught into this addictive notion that I need more to show that I have relevance. So now we're only relevant by what we own. And that's all an illusion. For example, you could have a dress that is an original designer dress that costs $5,000. Well, then you could get someone to make that same dress for about $200. I remember I was doing a lecture in Los Angeles, and I was going on Rodeo Drive, and I'm looking at, in one store had a picture frame, gold-studded picture frame for like $50,000. I'm thinking, who would need a picture frame with, gold framed and diamonds in it? I mean, that's the obscenity of where you can't think of another way unless you're going to put gold dust on ice cream. I saw that too, right? Insane things just to draw attention. It's all about exhibitionism. Do you remember when there was Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald and Judy Garland, these great personas? They would come out on the stage and they would sing Frank Sinatra, and they would sing, and we'd enjoy that. Now you have to have 65 dancers and all kinds of backlights, and in order to draw attention to yourself. How many people today, if we took away everything, just had them out on stage alone, how many would have that energy? So what a person does is they know that they're not authentic, and they know they're not at top of their game. So what they do is they exhibit exhibitionism, like Lady Gaga, who I think is an embarrassment. She has a moderate amount of talent, but she has to wear a meat dress. She has to wear gigantic shoes. She has to, why? What are you trying to prove? How insecure you are? Well, you did it. Madonna's the same way. What's the whole idea of that? Go to her concert. Does she look at you in the audience? She's looking. It's all voguing. It's all insecure people who are megalomaniacs trying to prove something, and people buy this. Right? They're not looking for authenticity, because when was the last time we had someone who had raw, honest, great talent, who had the it factor? Fred Astaire had the it factor. And the greatest dancers as a team, it was not Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, it was the Nicholas brothers. Two African Americans who had too few opportunities, but unrehearsed, one take, they did the greatest dance scene I've ever seen in my life. Cab Calloway, all right? They were jumping and splitting, coming down. That was one take, and it was perfection. I met him on the street, and I said, hey, I wrote a book called Black Hollywood, and you're in it. Yeah? And I heard someone talk about that. I said, wait here a moment. I ran up to my apartment, which is just a few doors away, and I came down, gave him the book. A wonderful human being. We don't have talent like that today. And isn't it interesting, the people who are judging who's got talent, to me, don't have any talent. What does Simon Kroll have in the way of talent, except the most droll, demeaning way of speaking to people, such arrogance, and we pride that. I do hear people who have some talent, but as if they're being told by people who can't possibly reach what they've done. So we suddenly make people artificially important. We make people artificially powerful because the perception is they're better, more attractive, stronger, beautiful, smarter. None of that is true. I'll give you one example. Out in Los Angeles, when I was out there on Rodeo Drive, I saw a beautiful suit. It was a special type of blue, not a whole lot different than the blue that Elaine's here. Come over, Elaine. Except it was just a little lighter. It wasn't the deep blue and it wasn't the light blue. It was just a shade lighter than this. And it was a beautiful suit in this Italian store. So I walk in and I said, I'd like to try this on. And so I tried it on. It fit. Okay. And I said, how much is he? He said, $5,000. I said, well, okay, that's more than what I can afford. And I said, but I got a question for you. Is this Italian made, or is it just made in Bulgaria with the buttons sewed on in Italy? I'm curious, because I know the game that's played. I was in Italy. I went to Valentino's showroom there, was able to load up on clothes at dirt cheap prices. Well, why dirt cheap there and so much in the United States? This is the game that is played. So anyhow, I said, and I gave this person my background in the fabric industry, and one of my hobbies is fashion design. And I design, you know, you've seen the different outfits. This is not one, but the outfits are really beautiful that I design myself and buy the fabric and have American labor, seamstress make it, and so it's made in America. And so I said, I'm going to bet this. And if I'm wrong, I'll acknowledge it. I'm willing to bet that this suit was not all made in Italy and that it cost about $200 in materials. Oh, that's not possible. I said, okay, if I'm wrong, I apologize, but show me that I'm wrong. So he thinks about it, and he doesn't say anything, so I leave. 2 hours later, after I went up and got my jumbo juice with fresh orange juice, as I do, and walking back down, I look and he says, come here. So he says, you got me thinking. So he takes me, he says, come around. So I go around the corner, and he goes out the back of the store, and we walk down a couple streets off Rodeo Drive, and there's an alley. We go in the alley, and there's looks like a garage, and we go in this building and hear a bunch of seamsters sitting there. And he was talking to this guy, and they're talking in Italian, and I don't speak Italian. And he says, you're right. And he said, it does cost about, and here's this older man who's been there, and he was the one who did a lot of the work. Yeah, it's made in one country, but as long as you have certain parts of it made. Now, that doesn't mean all Italian-made clothes are not made in Italy. You know, a lot of them are made in Italy. They have a very strong union, but not everything. And that's true of a lot of different fabrics. So then I said, am I right that about $200 worth of fabric in here? He said, yeah. And I said, okay, I'll offer you $900. And he took it. Now, what if I was just the average person and I believed the illusion that this was worth $5,000? It's not. It was worth, you know, $900, and they made a profit off that. They made about a 300% profit because they have a high rent, all right? And I respected that. So I don't profit at someone else's loss. So they made a profit, but a real profit. I got something I could use in my broadcast and, you know, my filming. So then a friend of mine is driving me down from West Hollywood, and you got the mountains, same mountain range. That's what you got to understand. The same little, it's not really mountains, it's hills, right? And it goes down for about 7-8 miles down to Griffin Park, where they shot the movie Rebel Without a Cause, the observatory there, which is a kind of mystical, wonderful place to be, because at night you see out over the whole valley with all the lights. It's really nice. But anyhow, about every mile or two, suddenly you got a new, like Bel Air, and you have a new area that is considered the area. When you drive up and down there, and one of my friends lives there, suddenly a house is worth 5 times more here than just a mile down. So they've made this one area that's all the same, and the houses even look the same, but just the fact that, well, this is a hot area now because such and such lives here. Because such and such lives here, you know, the land is worth more. Think of that for a moment. Stand back and say, but hold on, they're all living on the same hill, right? Well, but we've divided it up. Why? Because they're making us believe that if you live here, it's the hottest, newest location. And here it's the old and not as, you know, it's still expensive. And down here, well, you don't want to live down here where it's flat and, you know, everybody can see your house. Up here, nobody can see anyone's house. Everybody's got the big gates and everything. So everyone's living in their little cloistered area, pretending that they have something that is so unique that gives them an exceptional sense of perspective. My house, my property has cost this, blah, blah. It's all about the perceived value. What is the real value? It's just a house. Now, you can build almost any house. I built 6 houses. for about $100 a square foot, and it could look beautiful and magnificent. They'll say this house costs $500 a square foot. Why? Well, because someone is making $400 a square foot profit. And the broker, everybody profits by you buying into illusion. So in the balance of things, the reality is here, and the perception is here. There's no balance. So why would you waste all that money and go into that debt if you're going to mortgage something, when if the market changes, the perceived value is going to collapse? The perceived value of fashion. In fact, when I sent some of my staff to the Cannes Film Festival to premiere one of my films, the person who was going is just a regular office worker, and so I take her over and we go to a store on 3rd Avenue upstairs, and we're looking at all designer clothes. And so I asked the woman, do you have designer clothes that this person could wear that would really make her, fit her to where she would look terrific at presenting something? What if she was to present an award and walk out on stage? Show me those dresses. So they give a bunch of dresses. And I said, what's your best, most beautiful tuxedo? So we get a couple of tuxedos. So then she goes over there and she finds and pays for a male model. And then I say, go down and buy the most expensive bottle of wine, and then arm in arm, walk into the parties like you belong there. But act like you belong there. They had this wine, and they're walking in these beautiful outfits, every party they got into. And then they handed out copies of my film. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, they went down the street and hung a banner, the most important film to watch, Gulf War Syndrome Killing Our Own. And suddenly Nick Nolte and other people came around to this little tiny screening room about half size of this and watched it. Now, that's how you suddenly use guerrilla tactics, right? But their perception was, these people must be wealthy or famous because look at them. Only because a $5,000 dress I purchased for $250, but it was a beautiful thing. So we have to separate out how much is something worth based upon our being able to use it and appreciate it. We know the price of everything. We don't know the value of everything. How much do you value something? If I value my dog's life and she needs an operation, I don't care if the operation is $6,000, I'm going to pay for it. I value her life. If I value the sanctity of my environment and I want to grow 100 trees, I'm not going to look whether I'm going to get the money out. I want those trees because it's something I want to experience in the moment I'm there. Others might calculate, well, we can't buy this, we can't do that, we can't create this because we'll never get our money out. At a certain point, you have to stop asking, are you getting money out of something, rather than what joy are you getting from it? All right? Then you know the difference between cost and value. And we put too much emphasis upon the cost and not upon the value. That's why we should have bucket lists and say, these are the places I want to go in the world. These are the people I want to see. These are the foods I want to try. These are the wonderful Mount Kilimanjaro or wherever it is. I want to go to these places. Yeah, but you can't afford it. Well, what, are you going to die? And say, well, I didn't have quite enough money to afford that. Then start being creative. And it's how creative you are with your money. Be creative. All right? And when you're creative, then suddenly you're going to find you can do things. Because there's always charter flights where you can buy as a group and therefore you can go at 1/5 the price. But we don't think about it. We think of the convenience. I'll go on, travel.com, and we use these instead of going deeper to see where I can go places, how I can get there, what I can enjoy, and what that will mean for me, because that might be the only time in my life I'm going to see these unique and wonderful places. And isn't it a part of life to explore, to go, to do? Some people will pride themselves on going to one of these new restaurants down there that the millionaires, mere millionaires, eat downstairs, but the billionaires, well, they have their own special place down at the what is it, the place in the 40s on Weston Avenue, the new gigantic building complex.
Oh, I know, it's
Something, the West Yards, what's it called?
Hudson Yards.
Hudson Yards, yeah. Well, there's all perception and way overpriced for everything. But the idea is there are people who want you to know that they can afford to live there. So therefore they'll pay anything. Therefore, they have no concept of the value of it, only the price of it. So they're trying to buy a higher level of perception coming back at them, even if they never lived there. Oh, I have a penthouse in the yards. Oh my God. Those start at what, 20 million? Oh, higher. Oh, you can afford that? Oh, my yacht. That 300-foot yacht? Yeah. Do you like to go on it? No, I've never been on it. But I've got it down there, and I let people know. I got a 300-foot yacht, and I'm so rich, I don't even have to go on it. I have a fleet of planes. Who knew, right? Perception is what insecure people use to fill in the blanks in a void. And their lives are voids. There's no there. So that what they pretend to be is what they bring in. And that costs a lot of money. And has to be maintained. Who's that? Is that a superstar? Without makeup and styled hair? Looks kind of normal. See, I've had the benefit of counseling over 3,000 very famous people. I didn't go out, I don't advertise, they come to me. And they're all treated the same, with respect and dignity. They set, nobody gets ahead of anyone, nobody is rejected, but I don't allow them to bring anybody with them, no retainers, they have to come alone. It's just me and them. So I'm sitting across some people who are considered some of the most beautiful people or handsome people, and I'm seeing them without their makeup. I'm seeing without their Photoshop, blemishes taken away, and I'm seeing them just as who they are. Now that's fine for me, but boy are they insecure. Every one of these people is insecure, and they will pay any amount of money because they want people to believe that they're something more than what they are. That's why they go to live in places, conclaves together, whether it's in Aspen, or whether it's in Telluride, or whether it's in Santa Fe, or Taos, or Malibu. Why? If you're secure, why do you have to be around other insecure people? That makes no sense. But if you're insecure, I can understand, be around other insecure people. Because you're all sharing each other's lies and deceptions. Nobody will know the real you because you're not going to show the real you, and you don't know the real them. They all pretend, air kiss, and we'll have meetings, and no, it's all nonsense, all deception. That's what happens when you begin to lose the grasp of what is real and what is illusion, and to what degree is it illusion, and how do I get back to reality? So when I'm back to reality, I'm making balanced decisions because I'm looking at the consequences of making any decision from an imbalanced perspective. My insecurity imbalances me. My fear imbalances me. My anger imbalances me. My incompleteness, guilt and shame imbalance me. My guilt imbalances me. So how in the world can I make an emotional decision that is going to be constructive if I'm living with the duality of having desires to grow, but my disciplines were all based upon staying incomplete. People work on being incomplete. We just never give them credit for it. We'd like to go rescue everyone. You must be suffering. You must be helpless. No, people master their diseases. That's something we can't get through our mind. Let's get you on, I don't know, But you're dying with diabetes and morbid obesity. You realize what you had to do to master with the discipline of accepting that your body was going to contort and you're going to be near death with every pound extra you gain? We don't want to see that because we don't want anyone to see it in ourselves. What we fear addressing in other people is because we're hiding it within ourselves. So how are we supposed to do? I just had this conversation today. In fact, with Luann, I just sent her an email. I sent someone a very short message. And the message I sent to this person was, thank you for the honesty in your comments this morning. But based upon my principles of harmonizing energy, you are in the right place with the right support team, and it's the right time. You are the right person with the right idea. So you have mastered this through your discipline, your focus, your commitment, your determination, your heart and mind. Now, that's a good thing, right? No, it's not. Because this person, for 35 years that I've known them, have never done a single thing that's right. Everything in this person's life is a crisis or a drama. And the support team is one of the worst human beings I've ever met. You would never want to be around this person, and there's just massive deception. So here's something important. This is really important. That is the kind of person that wants everyone to try to rescue them. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's good. I see now. I see now. I see now. I see now. 1,000. Oh, I understand. I understand. I understand. And the big reveal is that there never was a true desire to leave a toxic environment with toxic people at any time, because it kept going back to that over and over. That means you're mastering it. That's who you are. We just don't believe that people who are hurting and people who are making bad decisions want to do that. We have to go rescue them. The game is, the reveal is, they didn't want to be rescued. Right? That's their story. But the reality is they make no change. You can see how many times in your life you try to give input, information, help to someone. No matter what you did, there's resistance. Always an excuse. Resistance and excuse. And this person just acknowledged this today. Acknowledged this. This was the person going to come here. And I just invited them. Once they revealed, because I'm not allowing that energy on this place. Because it would spread. You get negative people who are playing a game, it spreads like a virus. So that is closure, which is a good thing. Luann said, thank God I don't have to keep counseling this person after all these years. Because they revealed. See, everybody thought when I said the harmonizing life was all about positive harmonizing. Well, the Nazis harmonized negative. The mafia harmonized negative. Killers harmonized, rapists, Wall Street is all negative all the time. It just puts a veneer on that it's something special and unique and kind and thoughtful. It's not. The military-industrial complex, major corporate interests. These are not nice people, but they've mastered harmonizing all the wrong energies. So they've harmonized them for no good, but they've succeeded at it. So they are the right people with the right ideas and the right support team, and they're in the right place, and they control everything, so they win. It's just an inversion from what should be an ideal of good to make it a better world, to make it better for themselves, no matter what it costs everyone else. And if you doubt that, look at Yemen today. Look at Libya today. Look at Syria today. Look at Honduras today. Look at all the places that these people, power people, use their power and the media, their lapdogs, to control and destroy because there was some profit. If there was no profit, they wouldn't have done it. So they harmonized all those energies in the wrong way, and they succeeded. Where I'm talking about harmonizing them in the right way, being in the right place, at the right time. Living on the ocean is the wrong place at the wrong time, right? Not saving any money is the wrong idea. Being around people who are toxic or negative or share negative energy is the wrong support system. So how can you hold on to something and grow if what you're holding on to is regressive and is the opposite of growth? You can't. So you have a duality. You're bouncing between ideal, I want it, this is a higher ideal, let's talk about it, that's the whole New Age movement, just a fraud. Versus, what are you doing? That's who you are. We have a hard time accepting that some people are just inherently bad to the bone. They're not redeemable, and they don't want to be redeemed. They don't want to change, no matter what the consequences to other people themselves. And we'd like to believe everybody can change. No, they can't. Do you believe everybody can change? Well, let me just ask you, let make me really simple. Have you seen everybody change? Now, I've counseled over 70,000 people. I haven't seen but about maybe 5% change. And those 5% legitimately changed. 95% didn't. So that's the reality. We're putting onto people ideals that they don't understand and reject. So that's the reveal. So wouldn't it be nice if everybody had to walk around with a sign that flashed? I'm revealing that no matter what you do for me, I will not respond in a positive way. I will show you my life is incomplete. I never finish anything. I'm cluttered. I'm confused. But I need that because that's my identity. I wouldn't know what the hell to do if I was free and responsible and happy. So I got to pretend that I'm not. So you'll spend time trying to save me. So now we get people who don't want to be saved, but pretend they do, with a group of people who want to save people, not realizing a lot of that wanting to save is redemption for their own incompleteness. The more incomplete you are, the more your efforts will be made to redeem your own incompleteness by saving an unsavable person. Both people win because they're pretending something they're not. Both people lose because there's no change. Does that make sense to you? Have you experienced that yourself? Yeah, see? These are the truths that really matter. Everything else is just a pretense. Well, that's a lot to share, and we've gone a little longer than a TED Talk. But hopefully it's given you some ideas of how we lose balance, we lose perspective when we are disadvantaging ourselves. So before you do something, before you say something, before you commit to something, think further ahead and say, what are the likely consequences and unintended consequences of what I'm suggesting? Thank you for watching.
Are you tired of closed-minded programming? Well, look no further than PRN.Live, the home for progressive voices.